this is what I'm going to show you how to make this video. As always, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything from this video is available at the top of the description. Definitely go grab that. It really helps support me, but it's also going to help support you. It's a really great template, and this can take your tracks to the next level right today. It's one of the best things you can do right now to make the best music you've ever made. I've also got the link to my lessons and ghost productions and track finishing at the top of the description as well. Definitely go there and book one if you guys are interested in getting some help from me. I can really help you take your career to the next level for an affordable, accessible price. And plus, like I said, this is something you can do right now to make the best music and get where you've been trying to get. So, link is at the top of the description for all that. Definitely go grab that. Thank you so much for the support, guys. And it's also about supporting you. Let's dive in. Alright, so we're at 130 BPM. First thing up here is the side chain. So yeah, I just called it side, and all this is it's the same kick that I'm using down here as the kick, but you can see I've muted it, and it's just like really short. And this kind of gives you more groove when you sidechain stuff, like you can hear it with the bass. You get this very like snappy sidechain, and it sounds a lot better than if you try to just sidechain everything to the actual kick. So after that, the next thing we have is the actual kick. So you can hear it's just this super fat. This is a 909 kick, actually. It says Tech House kick, but it's one of these 909 kicks that I've worked on in the past that I brought in here. And you can see there's really not too much processing. Even this thing over here that might look a bit daunting is not doing that much. But really it's just about getting a really, really good, punchy, fat 909 sample. That's really where the strength comes from. And I think that's what's really going to make it work. You know, you can't just grab, like, to be honest, the Ableton, like the Core 909, isn't going to do this. Like, you need, like, a really, really just punchy, fat sample. Luckily for you, there are a million 909 samples on the internet that you can dig through. There's also this one on the top of the description and a bunch of others on my website that are all handpicked that are super high quality. But that's really what you want to look for. It's just super good 909. And then I've got a bit of saturation on it, so you can see we get the drive up, 16 dB, and then we're using the wave shaper actually. So it might seem like a lot, but the key to this is the dry wet. I'm blending this at 21%. So here's without it, and then with it. Without it, with it. So you can see it obviously adds a little bit of volume, but what it's really doing is actually like adding some fatness to the kick without taking it over, because the foundation of the kick is good. Like this is all the bass and like kind of punch that you need. So if you put this on top of that, because that's what this is, it's a layer when we're doing the dry wet there, you can really just add some punch to it. And we've also, yeah, you can see with the wave shaper, you know, it's one of those things that you really, I could tell you what every single one of these knobs does, but it's like, even knowing that, I mean, this is really something, you know, you're just going to kind of open this up, play around a bit, and find what sounds good. You'll very quickly find what doesn't sound good with the wave shaper on kicks, but you also then learn how to make it work better. So that's the kick, and then we have the bass. So this is actually a really simple bass line, musically speaking, right? We're only using 4 notes, and it's a very basic F sharp minor scale. So we're in F sharp minor, like I said. We're using the root note. We're using the 5th. This is just another root note. Minor 3rd. So if you see that it's really just like an F sharp minor chord. And then this 9th. Which is a fancy way of saying one note down from that 3rd. Right? So it's just really simple, and then it resolves nicely. When you go dun dun dun. For the actual sound on this one, it's made with operators, so it's this FM sine wave bass, but a lot of attention is put into really getting this to be like fatter without ruining the low end, because we're starting with this basic sine wave, right? Like, you know, that's obviously where a lot of that punch is and fatness is going to come from. And it's kind of like the saturation on the kick. Like when you're working with this FM, you want to add these oscillators in. to where you hear that difference. Obviously, that's adding a lot of mid-range and fatness to it, but if you don't want to do too much. Because now, all of a sudden, it's like a 2014 deep house bass, and that's not really what you want. I got this one as well, just a little bit, and even a little bit of that one. And then we've got the sign shaper on this filter here. So you can see the filter is down, and then that really helps as well, because it gets rid of all that clickiness. And then also, we've got a tiny envelope on that to make it punch. And then also, I've got the sign shaper, and that's being blended as well. You can see just a little bit of that in the background really adds a lot. I've got this EQ here, cutting at 30 hertz, cutting out a bit of low end, actually, like the stuff that you don't really hear, that would actually make the mix very muddy. And then we have this side chain to that side, right here. And then we have this group with the kick and bass in it, a little bit of saturation, just gluing them together. I've got it blended here without it. And then with it, very subtle. The other thing with this really is when I was studying these tracks, I noticed you want to put a lot of emphasis on the kick, and the bass is actually a bit quieter. And I think if you turn the bass up too loud, it's going to mess up. Like mastering something like this can get really messy if you have this big fat 909 in your face, right? But if you turn the bass down and let that 909 kick shine a little bit more, and just make sure the bass is at least there, that's kind of the goal. Now, usually when you're mixing techno or something like that, obviously the bass is super loud, but that's something important to keep in mind. So then we have these break beats. So you can see what we're doing here is it's this pattern. We have two layered together. So one is like very much, more mid-range and kind of groove. You can see I've got the low end cut out and even a tiny bit of highs cut out, which is helping it not crunch in the master as well, because there's not so much high end pushing up against that. But then this one, which has the same pattern, but it's just playing in the high end, right? And so when you do that, you get a really full sound, and it works really nicely. And that's how you layer breaks together. It's not just grabbing random drum breaks and putting them together. They gotta be like this, where they really do two different things, and then using whatever filtering you use, it's gonna kind of accentuate that. Then we also have these. Right, so these are just these amen breaks. Kind of doing a fill. But listen to how that sounds coming out of the other breakbeat. It just is a really nice groove there, having that little fill. And you're hearing, that on its own sounds cool. So now, keep in mind, you're hearing that this whole time underneath all this other cool stuff. So that can really add a lot to the groove in a subtle way, just having that little fill. And it's not even that hard to do, really. And then we have these drums. Right, so those just kind of fill out. Kind of add a bit more punch. It makes your head bob a little bit more to the groove. So it's just a 909 hi-hat. A lot of 909 sounds here. It's pretty much 909 sounds and some 808 sounds. Those two drum machines and then drum breaks. That's where all this stuff is coming from. But yeah, so we've got that just pitched and shortened a little bit. And then the snare from a drum break, which has a tiny bit of reverb, a bunch of distortion, and then a high pass filter. And that's it for all the drums and the bass. So that's really the foundation of the track. Now we have the stabs. So what's happening with these stabs is it's kind of creating this sequence where there's two different grooves. There's this one, right? That's the call. And then the response in here. And it's this groove between the two of these. And I think when you hear this kind of track, it can seem daunting because you're like, dude, I grabbed a piano stab. Why is it not sounding quite the same? And I think it's a lot more attention to detail in terms of, I said, the grooves, having the call and then the response down here. But then even what's happening inside of these grooves, musically, this is actually pretty insane. What we've got is we have like a stab synth, which is playing this F sharp minor 9, right? Or major 9, excuse me. So we've got an F, right? Just like an F sharp major. And then a minor 7th, which is a very fancy way of saying one note down from that root. And then a 9th. Right? And we have this like plucky synth here. You can see it's like just 2 saw waves. Low pass with a little envelope on it. Some unison. Like a very tight unison with a lot of voices. So you get that nice punchy synth. But then we're layering that actually with this guy. And you probably heard this stab before. Now what's happening inside of this is one oscillator is at the regular octave and the next one is +7. So if we put that down, see what that's adding? And then that overtone, that's kind of what the stab down here is like working with. Like, because it's a bit hard to get these to work together musically, especially down here when you got 3 of them. That was a bit of a nightmare. But essentially it's like using these overtones and like just really using your ears. You know, you can get these to work. I mean, there's only 12 notes, right? There's literally only 12 possibilities of notes that it could be. So eventually you're going to find it. But yeah, you can hear those just kind of fitting together, even though like sometimes with these, when you play it on its own, you're like, wait, that's what that sounds like? But it works together with that synth chord. So you want to start with the synth chord also. That's a lot of how that's working and how I did that. Then we just have a bit of echo with a very little bit of feedback. That's the key to these, because too much feedback and you kind of, it ruins like the grooviness of it. You just want a little bit of echo. And also a tiny bit of dry wet as well. But you can hear it still. High pass, and then it's just being sidechained. And then for the second group of stabs. So this one was, like I said, a little bit more of a nightmare to put together. I started with this, just this piano stab. So right, so we're going. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Right, so I started with that, like a pretty simple ravey kind of pattern. And then I went, and then we added in this wavetable here. So you can hear that playing off of that. That's playing the same chords. And this is actually a similar patch to what you saw above. I copied that down here and just made a new version of it. And that's a good way to kind of design sounds as well. It's like, you know, just take the version of this you did before and build on it rather than making it new every single time. So this is 2 saw waves, low pass, little envelope, a little bit of unison. And then the same deal with the second one. Yeah, you can see what that's adding. And then we just have this little rave chord, which actually skips out on 2 of them. That's another one of those ones when you hear it on its own, it's like, what? But see, it adds more punch to the notes where it does play. And that's another good way that you can kind of make these feel a bit more exciting. And again, like, if you just grab one stab and you're wondering why it doesn't sound right, it's all that little stuff that's happening. This also just has, like, the same little bit of echo, sidechain, high-pass filter. And then the last thing down here is the vocals. Now, I've gotten a lot of requests on how to do these types of vocals. And the main thing I can tell you, so this is a very simple chop, actually. I'll show you. So this is the original sample. So what I did is I right-clicked, or double-clicked if you're on a Mac, and then the slice to new MIDI track, I did create 1 slice per 16th note, and then you end up with this. That actually might be cool for like some IDM or like ambient music or something. But basically what's happening is you get these like very tiny micro stabs, right? Because it's such short little 16th notes that you're pulling from that. And then what you do is you get those in pitch, so you can see some of these are in like, I ended up just deleting every one except for the ones that I actually did use, because you won't use a lot of them, right? But then you just have to get these in keys. So some of these are pitched up +6 and some are +8. But that was basically what made this work musically with the stabs. And then what I did, now that every single one of these is going to be in key, so you don't really have to worry about that too much, I just created a pattern which actually mirrors what the stabs are doing. If you listen to it, there's a few little extra notes where it kind of doesn't match up, but for the most part, it's just following what that's doing. And that's a big part of it, because if you try to make this too busy without following what's happening in the stabs, it's going to sound terrible. The only reason this works so well is because it sounds like it's like multiple elements creating one element. And again, it's just finding the notes that sound really good over top of each particular stab. And then it all comes together. So, that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, the entire template right in the top of the description. Thank you so much for the support, guys. I really don't make a lot off of YouTube, but with these samples, I'm able to keep going and keep bringing you guys new videos all the time on stuff like this that's not out there. Really, thank you so much for the support, but it also helps support you guys, because once you grab this template, I promise you'll make the best music you've ever made in your life. Thank you so much for the support. And also, go ahead and grab a lesson or gross production, track finishing. The links for that are at the top of the description as well. Grab one while it's still available. Thanks for the love, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.